Hey everybody, welcome back to Calgary Barbell. You are here today for what is called Form Check Friday. Now this is the series where we take viewer submitted videos rather. We collect them in our inbox. We use a random number generator to pick a few every week, and we put up this Form Check Friday. Our goal here is to try to help everybody become a little bit more efficient, become a little bit more mindful of their technique, and to iron out some of the sort of issues that arise when sort of, first refining your technique. The reason we started this series is because I really wish I had somebody to do this for me when I was first learning how to lift. So hopefully everybody watching gets a fair bit of value out of it. If you're interested in submitting a video, go ahead and submit a video to formcheckfriday@gmail.com. Any other email addresses or Instagram DMs or anything like that, unfortunately, just won't work because of the way that we do this. So just send it to formcheckfriday@gmail.com and we can get you up on the screen and look at your lifts. So our first submission here comes from Heracles, and hopefully I'm pronouncing your name right. He or she asks, can you help me check my Sumo Deadlift? Thanks. Where did my file folder go? Boom. So we're going to take a look at this Sumo Deadlift here and see what is going on with it. All right. So it looks like just a single, which is kind of unfortunate. I would like to see another rep there just to see sort of how things continued throughout the set. So this to me looks really good as we start. And honestly, this is something I pick on almost every deadlift, but the bracing through here, I think, is what needs work. So we're trying to tie the shoulder blades and the upper back down into the hips and pelvis using the lats. Trying to help stabilize and sort of create tension through the trunk there. Now, if you watch Heracles' shoulder blades as we start this lift, and I'll maybe just scrub through nice and slow so we can see the hips rise a little bit, and then we start to fall out of position, and those shoulder blades end up getting pulled forward up that way a little bit as he starts off the floor. Now, this being a single probably means that it's a relatively high intensity. It's relatively challenging. I mean, I would probably call this a single at a 7 or at an 8. I don't really know his lifting, but to me it was easy, but we did see some technique breakdown there. So that would probably be the one thing that I would focus on there. The rest of it looks pretty good. If you watch through, we're starting with mostly knee extension. Once we get to this point, we have a bit of a tighter back position. We lose a bit of the back position here. So that's probably the one thing I'd work on there is just in here. And then also trying to keep that pelvis kind of anteriorly tilted just a tiny bit. And then we go, and when we break the floor, everything's pretty good. So you can see right here, we're focusing on mostly knee extension to start the push. And the knees are extending, the hip and back are sort of maintaining their angle. And as the knees go to lock out, we pull the hips and back through, and we end up at a decent lockout. So yeah, if I were to be a little bit nitpicky, it would probably be that upper back positioning and that little bit of bracing as it relates to your shoulder blades down into the rest of your back. So a little bit more tightness there, I think would keep you in a better position. It's going to contribute to a little bit smoother lockouts for sure. Our next one comes from Angel. He's 38, he's from Mexico and not competing yet. So let us take a look. Looks like deadlifts here as well. Yeah. All right. Good. So these look pretty solid to start with. Pretty decent starting position. Everything kind of maintains where it's set. In the sort of initiation of the movement. We're not seeing too much hip rise. That would be one thing that maybe I would try to work on, is just pulling the slack out of the bar. And we actually just put out a video about this earlier this week about what it means to pull the slack out of the bar. And one of the big things is just stopping that forward knee travel. But honestly, you do a very, very good job of that set. So I'm gonna watch one more time just because I don't really see anything particularly that would need a whole lot of work. So I'm going to try to be a bit nitpicky here. Yeah, honestly, man, I don't think you need to change anything about your deadlift. So we're pulling into a pretty darn good position, and we'll see. I mean, there's a tiny little bit of hip rise there, but a tiny little bit of hip rise is not a big deal. You know, because we're not getting out of position. We're maybe dipping a little bit too far down when we sort of set up. We're getting a tiny little bit of hip rise there. But again, the majority of the movement as we pull through it. So let's just slow one down here. So it pulls in. Shoulders are aligned. We've got a pretty decent looking torso angle here. Shins are relatively vertical and sort of perpendicular to the bar. As we start, the hips, yeah, we get this little bit of hip rise, but then he catches himself here, and it's knee extension, push, hips through, solid lockout. I mean, it's, yeah. I would say that's an example of a very proficient conventional deadlift. So hopefully, you know, everybody watching can take something from, you know, things being executed properly, as well as from, you know, seeing people maybe not executing so well. Our next one here comes from Tallus. He says he really likes the content on our channel. He's been lifting for about 6 months. His body weight is 70 kilos. In the video, deadlifting 135 kilos for 3 reps. 17 years old, looking to become a competitive powerlifter, competing next year at a local meet, and is hoping for some comments on his technique. So let's take a look. So this to me is a little bit of a high hipped starting position. Now I think also you're quite long, so I would maybe move your grip out a little bit so that you could move your legs out a little bit, which would probably allow you to get your butt down, back extended more by virtue of allowing your knees out a little bit. So this here looks good. We got a little bit going on here in terms of sort of how the low back is tying into the pelvis there. I think this could be more extended, and I think that that could be achieved if we kind of widened everything up. Now, unfortunately, when you're really long like this, it makes it somewhat tough to conventional deadlift. So yeah, I would say the grip out a tiny bit to allow the knees out a little. And that's one thing I would maybe cue for you, is actually to push your knees out a little bit. And as you do so, push those knees out and try to get a little bit more extension through there. So we don't obviously want to see anything nearly exaggerated as that curve I just drew, but that will give you kind of an idea of what we're looking to do with some of this here. But yeah, that's probably the biggest thing. Because right now it looks like the knees are in a little bit. It's kind of crowding the hips, and we're not able to get a good sort of extended position off the floor there. And then by the third rep, we're essentially stiff-legged deadlifting it here. You know, we can see we're in flexion there, which again isn't like an injury mechanic or anything. It's just usually less efficient than having a more neutral sort of back position. This is definitely nothing I would worry about from an injury standpoint. But here, especially starting with the hips high position and then seeing the hips raise more as we start, means that, you know, something's a little bit off with our bracing, with our starting position, and then we're having to go through a fair bit of back extension into the finish there. So I would adjust that starting position, and the way that I would do that is move the grip out so the knees have room to push out so we can get more back extension. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody. All right, what do we have now? We have one from Dylan. Now I wish this was big lanky Dylan, cameraman Dylan, because I'd love to put him up on here and try to roast him. But this is from Dylan LaSalle. He's training to compete in his second powerlifting meet in June. Here is a clip of his third set of 3 at 87%. Says he appreciates the content and keep killing it. We plan to, Dylan. We plan to. All right. So let's take a look at these squats, Dylan. Great, dude. So there's a lot of really good things. Number one, I really like what you're doing here. I like this bracing pattern, and mainly because you're able to maintain it. We're not, well, as I say that, we lose it a little bit on that last one. So that's gonna be something to work on, is maintaining. So that rep and the second rep, you do a really good job in this trunk and maintaining that position. The third rep, we kind of lose it. Those shoulders shrug up, and we can see this bar start to roll forward on us, right? Frame by frame here, y'all. As we hit the bottom, watch that bar move forward, forward, forward. And by this point, it's well out, sort of in front of the if I can draw an almost straight line. We're a little bit in front of where we kind of want to be. Now, if we look back, especially this first rep, so we can see this is where, this is again, my excellent straight line drawing abilities. And that's essentially where we rise from. Now, if we go forward, we're seeing that bar come down in about the same spot. And then here, it's a pretty big difference, right? We're seeing a bit of a sort of tipping forward, and I bet if we had a better view of your feet, we're getting out on those toes as well. So I would cue your heels a little more, and into and out of the bottom position. I think you could probably stay on the heels a bit more as well. One thing I might try actually is a heeled lifting shoe. Now this obviously can be a bit of a band-aid in some cases, but at the same time, it's going to allow you to hit that same depth, maybe even a little bit deeper. These do look a little on the line depth-wise, but yeah. So the upper back, we're doing a really good job. I think we're maybe tending to pull the elbows too far forward. I like people to kind of cue them down and almost together behind your back, in sort of, in that way, we can ideally create a really good shelf. Now you can't see what I'm trying to circle here, but what I'm trying to circle is that whole rear delt, mid-lower trap area where we want that bar to be super solid and glued in and kind of part of the body. We want the bar to feel like part of the body. If it's rolling around, if we're seeing, you know, sort of shrugging or movement in the shoulders throughout, then we need to do some work on that shelf position, and you know, that can kind of bleed over into putting us forward on our toes, or, you know, the reverse can also be true, right? So that little bit of forward pressure on the toes can cause you to tip more with the bar too. So it's a real chicken or the egg kind of situation there. But those would be the two big things I would work on, is staying rooted through the rear of your foot a little bit more, especially into and out of that very bottom position. So right about here, ideally, what we do is we kind of stop those knees from going forward, load everything up, keep it back in the hips, and try to sit straight down. Now actually, I should just draw a line on the knees. Right about there. Stop the knees going forward and sit straight down, which is mostly what we do. But I think there we're maybe a little bit shy of depth, so we could probably use a little bit more depth and just straight down, stay back on those heels a little more. Again, can't really see very well. There's not a lot of contrast in there between black on black, but I think we're probably on the toes a little bit. So work on that shelf and upper back position, specifically when we start to fatigue or when those sets get hard. Try not to over tuck the elbows in front of you. Just try to pull them in tight along your torso and try to make that bar feel like it's a part of you. As well as watch those toes, and let's try to get a little bit more depth. All right, hopefully that helps, Dylan. Good luck in your meet. It's coming up soon here, so hopefully training's going well for you, man. And our last one is from Matthew Lozano. Matthew. Let's see what we got here. Looks like deadlifts as well. Sumo style. So not the greatest camera angle. Very heavy single. All right, so struggled a fair bit with that sort of initiation of it. Now this is pretty good, but one thing I think is we're a little bit ahead of the bar. I would like to see everything back more. Butt back more, shins back more, and shoulders down more. Because right here, we're struggling and we're pulling forward over the bar. The shoulders pull forward a little bit, the butt pulls up higher a little bit, and then we kind of finally get the bar moving after everything shifts a fair ways up. So here we've got more elevation and protraction in the shoulder blades. We've got a much higher hip angle, and I would like to see you able to start with a position a little more like this. But again, we want that weight back on these heels a little bit more, and try to think about sinking and pulling everything back behind the bar more than it is. Right now we're a little too far over the bar. We're also not really pulling the slack out. We have this sort of moment where we go from loose to like pulling. So try to tighten everything up, try to build tension, try to find tension before we initiate the lift. I appreciate the patience off the floor. You actually do a really good job of not letting the hips rise any further once the bar starts going. So I would say that that fight to maintain position off the floor is pretty well fought and I think successful. But the position that we're fighting from, I think, is disadvantaged in some ways. Yeah. And I think, Matthew, that's our last one for the day. So again, if you guys want to submit, go ahead and send an email to formcheckfriday@gmail.com. Stay tuned for our live stream, which should be happening on Friday as per usual. It's usually around between noon and 1 Mountain Standard Time. And we do a lot of form checks. We do some Q&A and all that kind of stuff there. You can submit, get your form check live. And if you want to submit to the show, again, that is formcheckfriday@gmail.com. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll see you next time.